Now, I'm not the sort of person who usually likes to react. I think that reactions typically are problems because they end up creating an issue or augmenting an issue, that is, where something could be calmed down. A response as opposed to reaction. It's been a while since I've put anything on here. It's just because I haven't really felt like it. This is like my own little thing where I go ahead and speak my mind out there when I feel like I've got to. But as anybody knows, a lot has happened, especially in the last couple of weeks, with the whole Charlie Kirk and the response to it, and I guess we could talk a little bit that, a lot of people are talking about freedom of speech. And they're making big deals where there is no issue with the freedom of speech. And it seems like they're just not caring about those times when there are, this is a big problem. Okay? Now, of course, most people know freedom of speech is guaranteed by the United States Constitution and the First Amendment. It says, Congress shall pass no law abridging freedom of speech. Okay, as among the many things, Congress shall not pass law, freedom of petition, freedom of the press, etc., freedom of assembly. And I think one of the look at, and this is, there's a whole series of stuff that has gone on over just the past few days with regard to the freedom of speech. All right. First one, we have a late night host who went and made some comments. And look, it's just freaking BS. All right. The guy is BSing. The guy is putting out there things that, while it's the model of putting out disinformation without actually putting out disinformation. And so he did it, and he said, these, the right are doing everything they can to make sure he's not one of theirs. Well, yeah, no, he was one of yours. And when that happened, we had the FCC commissioner that came down, and the commissioner, was he the commissioner, FCC commissioner, FCC, yeah, whatever. And he was in some interview, and he said, we've got to do something about this. Okay, time out. But the problem was that the FCC didn't actually do anything about it. These were private advertisers. These were, distributors. These were TV stations who said, we're not putting this out there. We're not putting out there what this guy had to say. Not really freedom of speech. Second thing that happened regarding freedom of speech, the big deal, is we had YouTube responded to Congress, Jim Jordan, and said that, yes, indeed, YouTube was banning people. YouTube was engaged in censorship. They didn't use the word censorship, but it was censorship. YouTube was censoring for partisan political purposes those users who were not breaking YouTube's rules. Now, we knew this happened. We knew this was going on with other places. Mark Zuckerberg said that, in an interview with Joe Rogan, that the FBI came over and said, it's good for you. You'll go ahead and you'll tamp this stuff down. We know that happened. We know through the Twitter files that parts of the government, for, again, partisan political reasons, were out there encouraging social media companies and legacy media companies to censor speech. this is sort of the back door to it. This is actually what fascism is. Fascism is a mixture of private and public, where whatever, we're going to leave private industry to do what private industry is going to do, but this private industry has to basically bow to the government. The government says don't do this, don't do it. If the government says do this, then do this. It's sort of the way that, and it's a pretty dick move if you think about it, but there's some constitutional basis for it. They say, well, this private company is censoring the speech. Well, you're making them do it. They can say no. It's the same thing that goes on with the Five Eyes. If anybody's ever heard of the Five Eyes, EYES. These are friendly European and Australian, Canadian governments that share intelligence. The U.S. government, under the Fourth Amendment, under the, and you can look at other jurisprudence that talks about the penumbra of rights, says that the United States government can't just go ahead and spy on its citizens. You know who can spy on the U.S. citizens? England can. There is nothing in the Constitution that says that the British government is not allowed to spy on U.S. citizens. So the U.S. government says, "Hey, we've got an issue with Jack Smith. England. What do you know about this guy? You don't know anything? Well, what can you find out about this guy?" And so that isn't an issue with the Constitution, because it is a foreign government that is going ahead and spying on Americans and just sharing that intelligence with the United States. This is the sort of shit that goes on all the time, okay? But we know that the government was affirmatively pressuring YouTube. They said it. It happened. The Biden administration said, this is what we're doing. This is what we want you to do. We want you to shut down these voices. And they did it for, quote, election integrity and for maintaining the COVID messaging. Yeah. That's actual First Amendment stuff that's going on. So we have Bondi and we have the Jimmy Kimmel stuff. Jimmy Kimmel wasn't an actual First Amendment issue. It could have been, but it certainly wasn't ripe at that point. Jimmy Kimmel, words coming out, hey, this stuff was brought by private action, the advertisers. And look, Jimmy Kimmel's getting 125,000 people a night watching him. That's not enough to keep the who are in the target demographic, okay? The target demographic, ages 18 to 49, because those kids are the ones who are viewed as having disposable income. So Jimmy Kimmel, and I look at it this way, brilliant PR stuff, brilliant PR. Jimmy Kimmel made himself relevant. Jimmy's people made Jimmy Kimmel relevant. But that was not a free speech issue. Pam Bondi, what she did, she came out and said that there is free speech and there are hate crimes. No, Pam. No. There is not hate speech. Hate speech is protected. And this is a pretty powerful threat against the First Amendment, because you're out there looking at people and policing speech on the basis of its content. A brief aside. Government is allowed to limit speech as long as the restrictions are what's called content neutral. That means we don't care what you're saying. This is not a free speech zone. This is not free speech over here doing this. Consider going ahead and saying we're going to have a protest going through a U.S. military base. Nope. That's not where these things occur. Content-based restrictions are those All right, now, look, this is what Biden's administration did, straight up. You can speak all you want as long as you agree with what the government position is, but if you say something that is different from what our position is, then you will be censored. That is content-based restrictions. That is against the First Amendment. And the defense to it is saying, well, we didn't do it. Well, they did, yes. No, they could have said no. Yeah. I'm hoping to see some powerful litigation on this. I'm hoping to see something going up to say that quasi-governmental action, and that is what it is, quasi-governmental, is a content-based restriction. You know, people are talking about, let's modify Section 230 and say, well, there's this. Look, let's cut down to the chase and let's get down to the basics on this. But just in the past few days, we've had this massive thing going on about the First Amendment. I could go on for hours about the nuances of the First Amendment. These nuances, of course, are lost in the partisan arguments and the partisan discussions that go on. We're losing that. We're looking at people saying, oh, this is violation of free speech. No, it isn't. This is Jimmy Kimmel. Why? Because he's a goddamn freaking celebrity? The guy's got more M's in his bank than freaking M&M factory, okay? When people were being censored, okay? Gavin Newsom signed a bill that said that any physician that is an MD or a DO who gives out medical advice that is contrary to the CDC is subject to the loss of licensure. And the law even said in it that it was no defense, it would be no defense if that physician was proven correct in that medical advice. And this is during the COVID era, when it said, no, there is no doctor out there who better look at the science, look at the goddamn literature, and legitimately want to save lives if you want to keep your license. Yeah, that was struck down by the courts almost immediately as saying, no, this is a restriction on speech. You can't do this. We see this stuff happening all the time. But what we find people focusing on as far as the actual, they don't focus on the actual speech issues. No, Pam Bondi, that is a free speech issue. The stuff that came out from YouTube, that is a major, because it's not something that they threatened to do. It is something that they were actually doing. Jimmy Kimmel, hey, great PR. He gained himself some relevance that he hasn't had in the past several years. He's going to end up having millions of viewers over the next few days, and then it's going to end up dropping off the cliff just like it normally does because it's boring, and now they're going to move on to something else. Pam Bondi, hey, sorry, chick, you got to go. You haven't actually done it yet, at least not that we know about. But that may be your saving grace, is that you end up getting kicked the fuck out before you have the chance to do something that's going to cause some real harm. Anyone in the Biden administration who is involved in that stuff, hey, may they be sued to oblivion. Because that was, that was pure freaking Goebbels level propaganda that they were putting out. And the opposing voice, the truth, was being shut down. Jimmy Kimmel, come on, this is what politics does. I really wish that Americans would look below the surface, to see what's going on underneath and see the machinations. That allows them to respond instead of react. Most people aren't going to watch this anyway. But that's how it is.